Fans all along our great nation. They're fans of many sorts. It can be for a sports team, a TV show, or a type of music. Some of the most passionate fans that I know of belong to the sport of football. Whether it's NFL fans on Sundays, college fans on Saturdays, or high school football fans on Friday nights, the fans are passionate and they care about their sport and their teams. They're devoted. They spend billions of dollars on football throughout the course of a year. In short, they are what I said, they're fans. However, many of these fans do not fully understand how football came about. Football came about sometime in the mid-19th century in England. The interesting part of the story is it actually derived from another sport, which was soccer. One day, a soccer player in England was frustrated that he could only use his feet to manipulate the ball and move it up and down the field. So he picked it up and ran with it. That's what he chose to do. It's against the rules in soccer, but just like that, rugby was born. Rugby came over to America in the mid-1800s, and it was a very popular sport with colleges in the Northeast. So much so that in 1876, Harvard and Yale, officials from both schools, met up to formalize the rules for the game in America. And they were very, very similar to those rules put in place for the sport of rugby in England. The biggest difference between their sport and the sport in America is in England, the rugby ball is a round-shaped ball, and in America, it was more egg-shaped. So, once the shape of the ball changed, they decided to also change the name, and that's how we got the word football. To ensure that the sport was governed properly, an organization called the Intercollegiate Football Association was formed, or the IFA. Although the shape of the ball changed, everything else about it was basically the same. The shape and the name were different. Other than that, it was the sport of rugby from England. Until 1880, when a Yale University player named Walter Camp began persuading the IFA to change a series of rules. Now, it took him 3 years, but once he got through to them, and the rules were changed, we come up with a sport that looks more like our football today. It is due to his contribution that Walter Camp is credited with being the father of American football. Two of the rule changes that Camp is known for is the establishment of the line of scrimmage, as well as the snap from the center to the quarterback, both of which are still around today. So after Camp made these rule changes with the IFA, college football continued to grow in popularity through the 1800s until professional teams began to come on the scene in the 20th century. College football had witnessed a switch in their governing agent. Their agent is now the National College Athletic Association, or the NCAA, just as it is today. By 1920, there were more than 10 professional football teams across the United States. Organizers from the sport decided to meet in Canton, Ohio, and formed the American Professional Football Association, or the APFA. This organization did not last long, and it later came to be known as the NFL, National Football League, which is the league that governs American football today. The NFL continued to change rules along the way. It continued to grow in popularity and develop new teams. This culminated in 1933 when the NFL had its first championship game. Many leagues were developed to try to match the NFL's success, although there's only one other league that could keep up, and that would be the AFL, or the American Football League. And they still weren't as successful as the NFL. So in 1966, the only other league that could keep up with the NFL decided to merge. They kept the name of the NFL. of the biggest impacts on the game we know as football occurred in the late 19th and early 20th century after Walter Camp convinced the IFA to change certain rules. One of these rules was you were now allowed to throw a forward pass. The forward pass allows teams to not only run the football, but to throw to an eligible receivers downfield as well. Many college coaches took advantage of this new rule, and they changed the game of football, and there's still traces of them that we can find in our game today. These coaches include Eddie Copeland, Amos Alonzo Stagg, Knute Rockne, and Glenn Pop Warner. Some of them you may have heard of, others maybe you haven't heard of. There are a couple of interesting facts that many of today's fans have no clue about, such as in Walter Camp's days, touchdowns were worth 4 points, 2 points were awarded for kick after touchdowns, 2 points for safeties, and 5 points for field goals. That's a big change because nowadays touchdowns are worth 6 points, kicks after touchdowns are worth 1, safeties remain to be worth 2 points, and nowadays field goals are worth 3 points. I feel it's necessary to help better understand the history of American football to look at a couple of the coaches that had the biggest impact, because thanks to what they did, the game of football is the way it is today. First, I'd like to talk about Eddie Copeland. Eddie was born in 1877 in Wisconsin. He's most notable for being the first coach to build an offense around the forward pass. Copeland was coaching at St. Louis University when the rules changed to allow forward passes. So on September 5th, 1906, the game of football witnessed its first forward pass. St. Louis's Bradbury Robinson threw the first forward pass to Jack Snyder in a game against Carroll College. This pass was the single biggest accomplishment in the game of football, where it changed the game of football like nothing had before. The forward pass was the great equalizer. It could cover an area of the field like you couldn't do by running the football. And it also helped whenever teams would dig themselves in the hole and give up a couple points early. You could climb back a lot quicker than if you were running the ball only. Also, Glenn Scobie Warner, also known as Pop Warner. A lot of people's heard of him. He was born in 1871 in New York, and he played the game of football at Cornell University, where he was, on his team, he was team captain, and he got the nickname Pop because he was a lot older than most of his teammates. He coached the game of football for 44 years, and over that time, he compiled 344 NCAA football wins. He won 3 national championships during his time, and he brought things to us such as the screen pass, spiral punt, the single and double wing formations, as well as the shoulder and thigh pads. So he not only helped with the game of football, but he helped with the safety of the players. And the double and single wing formations were the main formation that you would use in the game of football from the 1900s to about the 1960s. He also started Pop Warner football, which ensured that American children could have the right to play football whenever they liked. Knute Rockne was the last coach I'd like to talk about today. He was born in 1888. He's one of the greatest football coaches of all time. He, over his time, had 105 wins, 12 losses, and 5 ties, which is a winning percentage of 88.1% and is a record in Division I football. Knute implemented a shift in formation right before the snap, and he also contributed to the population of the forward pass, which is the single biggest effect on football of anything over the last 100 years. I feel that the story of American football is a good one. It's very important for a fan and for Americans in general to understand that and to know the football is the sport that it is. As Americans, we should be proud for the sport that we have. We understand that baseball may be America's pastime, but football has its own special place in the heart of Americans as well. Lots of people from around the world are envious of the game that we have, and that's something that we should take great pride in. And we should honor the game of football by first understanding where its roots are and where it comes from. Because this game of football has provided pleasure and enjoyment for kids and adults alike for many, many years now, and that's the great sport of football.